So, guys, I want to talk about AEW last night, and I have some, unfortunately, some good news and some bad news. The thing about it is that, I actually fell asleep, and when I started watching the show, it was like a half an hour in. And so I didn't really feel connected to the matches. Like, I always like to watch something from the beginning. So that hurt my enjoyment of the show, really. It's part of just, getting older. And then the other thing that's like the good news is that they announced a couple of AEW pay per views. So, I'm just keeping my fingers crossed. And I'm really, really hoping to go to all these shows, especially like World's End. I would love to go to Chicago, spend Christmas in Chicago, like have some really good food there. And then also, I'm also looking to hear back about the other shows that they're having, like the Toronto show, and also on the St. Louis show, a lot of great barbecue. Like I have to wait to see if my job approves me to go, but I'll be heartbroken if I can't do any of these shows. It kind of sucks because sometimes when we have jobs, and we work every other weekend like you do at a hospital. Sometimes all the weekends that AEW has a pay per view may land on the weekends that you have off really. But with that said, that this show was definitely very concerning. It was very, very detrimental in a lot of ways. Like one issue with AEW is the formatting. So while I wasn't really like invested a lot in the matches and the action tonight, I will like kind of go over the show and I will like kind of talk about the issue with formatting. And what that means is that everything felt a little out of sequence. So the show opens with the Outrunners versus the Young Bucks. And the Young Bucks, when they came out, what happened was they did like kind of like a comedy like thing where they're like, okay, they got like the crappy graphics and whatever, really, and like I've said about the Young Bucks, that a lot of people are not really into their dumb, stupid 48-hour film project type of comedy where it's almost like they're laughing at their own, you know, um, humor, really. So it's almost like they have to get to a point where they're like, okay, now what do we do with the Young Bucks longer term? Maybe this dumb comedy shit is over. Are they going to turn babyface? What's with the what future do you have with the Young Bucks? And then the Young Bucks win the match. I think what a lot of people are saying too is that they're a little concerned that it may lead to a heel team, FTR versus Young Bucks, another heel team. And while that would be a really good match, a Dave Meltzer match, a lot of people would say, hey, that doesn't really make any sense. And I also will say that there's a team called Brodito. Like, the person, whoever came up with that name, needs to be fired on the spot or slapped in the face, really. Like, I would say House of Bandit sounds better. Like, House of Black. Bandito is a bandit. Like, the House of Bandit or House of Bandit works very well. But Bandito, Brodito, anybody who came up with that name needs to be, like, slapped, maybe punched in the face, really, because that is, like, part of my language, but a very, very retarded name. So, Brodito, whoever came up with that, needs to be fired on the spot, really. The next thing that I will say is that, after that, there was, like, a segment with, like, MJF, and he was, like, talking to Shelton Benjamin, and what happened is that, MJF is out of the Hurt Syndicate. And the reason why he's out of the Hurt Syndicate is because he pissed off Bobby Lashley last week. MVP is so disgusted he doesn't want to like see Max in person. And then Shelton Benjamin kind of says, okay, you know what, I was holding this from you, but I know that you gave me a watch that wasn't a Rolex. It was, a knockoff Rolex. So, though there's two things that I think is going to happen. Either, and there's people who are rumoring that they're going to do a match where it's Mark Briscoe versus MJF for the contract, and then Mark Briscoe's going to gain it with the help of the Hurt Syndicate. And there's the other thing that could happen where this could all be a ruse for eventually for MJF to hire the Hurt Syndicate to attack Hangman Adam Page. And I think that that's probably the best route to do this, like, because the problem is that Adam Page is a babyface. It does not make sense for Mark Briscoe to win that contract, and Mark Briscoe usually loses a lot. So I understand they may try to build up Mark Briscoe now, really, but it's almost like, why would a babyface challenge a babyface for a title? that feels like this feels like they're pulling at strings really. Like as I said, I think that what I should do is I should do a fantasy booking video of Hangman Adam Page really, because I think that they're probably drawing at strings really, but I really don't want to do Mark Briscoe versus Hangman Adam Page because really these contracts people have to win it, and then also too, I do not want to see another year of you see somebody like Mark Briscoe cash it in and it's unsuccessful really. It has to be successful. And there's two ways to do that. You have a good match between two wrestlers like Rob Van Dam and John Cena. RVD beats John Cena. They need to do that with Mark Briscoe if they want to go that route. Or they need to do the chicken shit heel, type of thing really. Like that's the best way to do it. And then after that, they did have I'm trying to remember what match that they have, but I don't remember it because they had like two matches, and then they had Jon Moxley versus Hangman Adam Page, and I agree with this is where like a lot of the problems started with the show. That first of all, the big problem was that why would you have this match at 9:00 really? Like you either start the show with a World Heavyweight Championship match, or you end the show with a World Heavyweight Championship match. Because this kind of undermines him being champion. This is almost like when CM Punk won the WWE Championship, and then he was main eventing WrestleMania. This does kind of have that vibe, really. So that does not make sense that you would have, another match, and then you're main eventing with Mark Briscoe versus Ricochet. That's just not a good usage of, time and whatever, really. So what happens is that, and I also didn't like this match because, once again, they need to stop this. This is one of the reasons why people don't like AEW or stop watching, is because you have a match that says nobody at ringside. So what do? You have a bunch of people at ringside, and you don't do something like what Jim Cornette did in TNA. If this was like Jim Cornette and this was in TNA, he would say, okay, you guys are fined or you're fired for coming to ringside, create some real consequences. It's the same way that Moxley always gets some advantage and then loses, or he always gets an advantage and wins, is having the Death Riders interfere, really. So that has to stop, really. I understand they were trying to set up Moxley and Darby Allin, but it's to a point, real, where it's almost like, come on, the Death Riders interfering way too much. That's just not good for anybody, because it makes your heel look weak if that's always happening. And it's almost like, what are the rules in AEW? What are the consequences in AEW if you're always going to have the bad guys, just break every rule with no consequence? And then the other part of it is that, and this is where I got really mad, is that you did two things that were bad. That first of all, in AEW, they have this rule that I hate, which is that referees can throw out the 10 count rule if they feel a match warrants going past the 10 count rule. That makes no sense. That's why when you had MJF and Will Ospreay, they did a bunch of shit in the crowd when that wasn't a false count anywhere match. And in this match, same exact thing. They didn't say that rule or whatever rule really, but they allowed them to go outside the ring for more than 10 seconds. That shows that there's no rules in AEW. And then they also did spots on chairs, and they threw did spots on ladders. They did spots on stairs, and then they tried to do a pile driver around the announce table. So once again, that's why people don't watch AEW, because you're breaking logic. You need to have those rules, because if you don't have those rules, then it's like anybody can do whatever the hell they want, really. And that's not good professional wrestling. That's just saying that this is just like the video game Power Stone, where you can kind of go anywhere and throw anything, and referees overlook it. So that's not helpful. Just call false count anywhere and subvert expectations by not doing all the violent stuff. But I'll also give them credit, because I don't remember any blood in this match. And that's good, because you can't always have every Moxley match having blood. Another thing that I'll give them credit for is that that the Don Callis family, and Don Callis was not on the show, best of my memory. And that's actually a good thing. You only had Okada, but I'm okay with that, because the thing is that Don Callis cannot be on every show. He cannot have a faction of people losing every single show. So it's good to have a bit of a break with him. The next thing that I will say about this show is that you had Tony Storm and Alex Windsor versus Billy Starks and Athena, and I want to say Billy Starks is like a fucking goddess. Like she's like beautiful. She has like that beautiful punk rock cute type of look. Like she is a fucking goddess, you know. So, you know, like I said, if I had a choice between winning the lottery or having her as a wife or a girlfriend, you know, and that's what she wanted as well, and it's cool. It's not like, you know, creepy or anything like that. Really, not like the Epstein list or anything like that. Really, if it was a cool relationship, you know, I'll be like, you know, I won the motherfucking lottery because, you know, she's very beautiful. She has like that spunky, cute type of look, and I always like, you know, women with colorful hair. You know, like they say blue is the warmest color. Blue is the warmest color for my heart, and purple is beautiful too. Purple's starting to become my favorite color, but I digress. You know, and then you just had the match. Two things that I liked is that Tony Storm did not do her licentious limericks this week. That's good because she cannot do that every single week. Subversion of expectations. And subversion of expectations means unpredictability, or you think it's going to go one way and it goes the other way. And then speaking of subversions of expectations, they made the right call and had Athena pin Tony Storm. And the reason why that was the right call is for two things. Athena has been the ROH champion for very, very long. And you have to show that if you hold an ROH title, you are capable of being successful with an AEW championship or being an AEW champion. For example, if you had Trick Williams hold the TNA championship and you had him have a match with AJ Styles over it and you have Trick Williams beat AJ Styles, that would be good to show, okay, this is not just a title that you hold and you can't beat anybody with it. Or if CM Punk, when CM Punk was the ECW champion, I don't remember him beating a wrestler on SmackDown or while he was the champion or Raw, but if he beat like a good wrestler like Triple H or somebody else or Shawn Michaels while holding the ECW championship, that would be a good look, really, because there's a lot of times when people hold a championship on like a developmental brand and they always lose when they're on like the main roster or whatever, you know. So it's good that she did beat Tony Storm to say, hey, anything can happen, and Athena is a threat, really. And that's all good. And then the other thing it is that Athena's been champion for like almost 1,000 days with the ROH women's title. So you have to really show if someone's gonna be your rival and they've been a champion for over 1,000 days. They've been headlining more pay-per-views than Tony Storm. And Tony Storm has never headlined in AEW pay-per-view, but Athena has headlined multiple ROH pay-per-views. So ultimately, you have to say that makes her more of a threat to Tony Storm. And actually, you should have Athena beat Tony Storm. And I think that would be another good video. Because, you know, you have to make sure that Tony Storm is not invincible. You know, it's different when you have Mercedes, who has so many titles, and she doesn't treat her other titles like a big deal. And then you actually have somebody like Athena who puts in the work. And her motivation is that if she's been good with one title and holding down for so long, really, you know, why not go after two titles? Like she like feel like, you know, she can do good with both, really, or saying like, you know, since I've been doing this, I had this women's championship for such a long time, I've been doing so well, I want to have both, really, you know, I want to have both. I want to have both crowns, and I want to have all the power in the kingdom, not just half the power. So that's good, really. So I'm happy that she won. And that's that. And then also, too, like, I would also say that, you know, I'm not a fan of Alex Windsor. Like, I don't like that Windsor and all that. That's just too, like, you know, that I'm not sure what the word is for that, but that's just, like, too, like, that's kind of, like, obnoxious to me. Or it's just kind of, like, you know, it's going to, like, you know, cause my ears to bleed because it's so, like, obnoxious, really. And then, I don't know, it's just too playful for me in my sense, you know. So that was like your penultimate match. And in the main event match, I didn't see it, was Ricochet versus Mark Briscoe. Ricochet loses, and I believe you had a tag team attack the Gates of Agony, and I believe it was like Brodito again. And then there's a couple things I need to say. I think what I heard was that MGF got on the Titantron, he tried to distract Mark Briscoe, and then you're setting up a feud between Mark Briscoe and MJF. Okay, I can understand that because I can understand that, and I can understand why I main evented, because if you're gonna have Forbidden Door, you gotta have segments where wrestlers matter, and sometimes that means main eventing some shows. Really, this could have easily main evented a Collision, but for you to have a heavyweight championship match at at the 9 o'clock hour and two more matches after that, and this is the ending, that's not good. It buries your champion, really. It's almost like saying Mark Briscoe, Ricochet, Gates of Agony, who always lose, MJF is more significant than Hangman, really. So that's not a good thing. If I was formatting the show, I would do this. I would start with I would start with the tag team tournament match. And then I would do MJF and his issue with the Hurt Syndicate, and then I would do is at 9 o'clock you would have Ricochet versus Mark Briscoe, and you have all that all that crap happen. And then what I would do is I would do Toni Storm and Athena as the opening of Collision, and then as the main event Collision, I'll do Kyle Fletcher versus Dustin Rhodes, and then I would main event this show. And then I would just main event this show with what I have to say really is the heavyweight championship match. And then I would just say, okay, nobody at ringside. This is almost like a lights out match. We're gonna put it like that, really, where nobody interferes. This is also a match where there's no pile drivers or ladder spots. It's just people in the ring, really. And then you can have like maybe another match, in the middle of the show, really, type of thing, really, because that way you're saying that your champion ends the show. And then like you can have women main event Collision or open Collision if you want to give them a shot, really, or they can main event Dynamite. But for right now, you need to show Hangman's a strong champion. He should not be the 9 o'clock hour. Then you have two more matches after him. That's not a good look. And I would also kind of say too that they also have to think about matches, and I really think that as a lot of people are saying, the Death Rider thing needs to end. And as I said before, and I'll say it again, that there's two things that, there's two reasons why they're continuing this. They want to get to Moxley versus Darby, and they also probably want to get to Blood and Guts eventually. Like, maybe do Blood and Guts in Philadelphia or something like that. But I think that, as I said, and I'll say it again, that they can do without Blood and Guts this year, and that wouldn't be a good match to have, because you had the Texas Death Match You've had the Texas Death Match for your main event of your biggest show of the year, really. So why are you trying to main event a television show with the same type of bloody match, really? I do appreciate them being more focused on story and character, but the formatting is a huge issue, and that all that means is that some matches should have been in the main event of the show, some matches should have started the show, some matches should have been like should be like before the 9 o'clock main event, the 9 o'clock main event, and the penultimate of the show, which means before the main event. So they really, really struggle with formatting, and that's what's been really hurting AEW, because, like I said, imagine if you had Cody Rhodes win, if you had John Cena win the WWE Championship at WrestleMania, and then a few weeks later, he's during like the 9 o'clock main event, and then you end the show with Trick Williams as the TNA champion versus Santino Marella, wanting to bring that back to the company, and Santino Marella is doing like the Cobra and other things like that to entertain the crowd. You get what I'm saying, really. You're putting like you're putting other people who don't really deserve it at the end, really. And or you can even say like you put like maybe Sami Zayn versus that wrestler like Chad Gable, or that guy or that luchador with all the American gear as the main event, and John Cena versus Cody Rhodes rematch at the 9 o'clock thing, really. So definitely they have to work a lot harder on formatting, because that's one thing that really, really hurts their shows.